Welcome. We'll move on to question number 7, and that is functions of auditor. Now, what are the functions of auditor? Functions of auditor and functions of audit are very similar. They cannot be different. They cannot go into different directions. So they are in similar direction, and that makes us easy to answer two questions. So we just have to learn one answer, and accordingly we can answer the second question. So whether you learn functions of auditor or functions of audit, you can answer the other question. Okay. Now, basically, the functions or the objective of audit is to verify books of accounts and annual financial statements. That is, you want to detect and prevent frauds and errors. Now, in order to achieve this main objective, what does an auditor do? He examines the system of internal check, and if he comes across some problems, if he finds it inadequate in some manner, what he does is he will suggest some improvements. He verifies vouching, that is, whether the transactions entered in the system are properly authorized. Okay. Third thing he does is postings. Okay. Checks arithmetical accuracy of the books of account. And then fourth point is he sees whether classification, whether expenses are properly classified as capital and revenue, whether the they're properly distinguished. He also checks whether the necessary adjustments have been made. The fifth thing is assets and liabilities. He checks whether assets and liabilities do exist or there is some difference between the assets and liabilities, physical assets and liabilities, and those mentioned in the paper or those mentioned in the books. Okay. And again, after checking the number, he also checks the valuation, so if they are properly valuated or not. And one of the major functions, I would say, is finding out if various statutes, laws, acts, the provisions of the same are followed or not. So say if it's a banking company, negotiable instrument acts, so all the provisions thereunder are followed or not. If it's a company's law 2013 has been followed or not, so on and so forth. So this is one of the very important function. So he just not have to check arithmetical accuracy and classification of revenue and expenditure and so on and so forth. He also has to check whether the business is functioning as per applicable laws or not. And lastly, which is again a very important point, is reporting. So he has to report to the proper person. So in case of partnership firm, he'll report it to partners. In case of company, he'll report to shareholders, so on and so forth. And the reporting has to come along with an assurance. So that was question number 7. We move on to question number 8. What are the qualities of an auditor? So in order to qualify as an auditor, you need to have certain qualities, right? So what can be considered as or rather qualities of auditor? Which qualities an auditor or a person needs or requires to possess to qualify as an auditor. The first one is, let's call it as personal qualities. He should possess qualities like firmness, good temper, caution, judgment, patience, reliability. And these are self-explanatory. If a person is not reliable, whenever he expresses an opinion, if a person is not reliable, nobody is going to trust him. And ultimately, the purpose of audit, one of the most important objective that we studied when we were discussing the question objectives of audit or auditor, was reporting. So when a person is reporting to you and the person is not reliable, you would not place much trust on that person or his report. Similarly, he needs to have patience, because patience is required. Auditor undertakes process of auditing, and this might be a long process. He not only deals with records, the documents, but he also has to deal with people, the staff at client's workplace, and it's not always easy to get information from these people, especially when they have been negligent during the audit period. they have committed some mistakes and they are aware of it, or they have committed fraud willfully. So patience is also required, and similarly other qualities. Apart from that, he should be honest and should always exercise a reasonable skill. Second point is general knowledge of principle of law. We again discussed this in last answer. He should know Partnership Act. He should be aware of basic principles of Companies Act, so on and so forth. Again, if it's a cooperative society, he needs to have a good knowledge of bylaws, etc. Thirdly is human qualities and achievement. He must have technical requirements. So suppose if it's an internal audit, not internal audit, I would say uh, audit pertaining to information system, he should have necessary technical qualification, like he should have certifications like say CISA or DISA, so on and so forth. Again, if the company is in a particular industry, so he needs to have a basic understanding of the industry, how things work, because practically there are different norms, different terms and conditions, and those are practical, they are not written, but that's the practice of industry. So these practices, they vary from industry to industry. So the auditor must have a good understanding of the industry in which the company of the client is operating. So say if a shipping, you need to know how the shipping industry works, how the clients collect their cargoes, how they place orders, so on and so forth, when is the payment received as per the standards, etc., etc. So it needs to have this basic idea. Unless you have a basic idea, you won't be able to express a good opinion, proper opinion. So that knowledge is required. And last point is common sense. Now this point is again very important, because you cannot be rigid always. You need to understand that there are boundaries within which the company is supposed to operate, company is supposed to do its business, but these boundaries, I would say, are not rigid, they are flexible to an extent, and that is what that is where this point comes in. So apart from that, let's see what the point has to say. Auditor may come across an incident which may not find place in any book or theory. In such case, auditor is tested for his common sense and alertness. So everything cannot be mentioned in the book, and since everything cannot be mentioned in the book, the auditor is likely to come, not frequently, but once in a while he may come across an incident or a point which is not mentioned in theory, but practically it may be valid, it may be reasonable. So that should not form the basis of qualifying the report. This is what the point tries to say. So we have finished question number 7 and question number 8.